Hear Me See Me podcast is sponsored by Zenoti, the #1 cloud software for salons and spas. Because when people feel good, they find their greatness. I am Stuart Roberts, and I'm really excited to introduce my new podcast, Hear Me See Me. It's just over 5 years ago, I did something that changed my life. What it did, more than I could have ever realised, it helped me. I have met some absolutely amazing people. Some of the people that work in some of these places, many of them are volunteers, but some of them, it is their job. I'd had this idea after being inspired by a guy in America I'd seen cutting hair on the streets and seeing the difference it made to the guys who were there. This is more than a job. This is a calling. Hello, this is Stuart from Hear Me See Me podcast, and this morning, on a lovely sunny morning, I've got the wonderful Henrietta McEwan. How are you?
I'm really well, Stuart. How are you?
Very good. Just about awake on a Sunday morning, but I will wake up as we go. Well, we met recently. We've only known each other for a little while, but I feel like I've known you for forever.
Yes.
But we met to do with the CEO Sleepout.
Yeah, that's right. And I'd also heard a lot about you through L'Oreal and also through Errol Douglas as well. And that's why I kind of reached out to you and said, look, why don't you come and do this? Why don't you come and, do this CEO sleep out for a night, raise some funds? And oh my God, did we have fun that night. It was a good night.
It was really good.
It was a really good night. Cold, but good.
It was extremely cold. I mean, the sobering thought, though, is that took me about a week to get over that.
Yeah.
And we was privileged because we was sort of, even though Errol Douglas, myself and Louis Byrne was hardcore, we went right out from a lot of people but we went right out underneath the stars. Having said that, it was so bitterly cold, but we could nip off because, there was, obviously great facilities. Anyone wanting to do this, you are looked after because you can go off and get a cup of tea and all that. Yeah. You can go to the loo, but our friends on the street, they can't do that. They can't, they've got no little respite where they can get away from it.
And it was actually Louis Byrne that introduced us as well, because it was Louis that introduced us. That's right. And I'd heard about you through Errol, but I'd also seen a lot of the other work that you'd done. Yeah. And I was itching to get a hold of you at some point to say, right, we need to have a chat. And how can we help you at CEO Sleepout and also change?
Yeah. I think as well, what I was surprised at is that within about half an hour, even though I had all the gear, I'd like a tarpaulin on the floor and we had a sleeping bag and all that stuff. Within half an hour, it was soaking wet. Now, it was a dry night, but everything is soaking wet. So when they're out there, it's not just the rain that's going to, it's just the damp and the cold. And it gets right into your bones,
Yeah, it does. It does. And I just think, how can people pick up their life and carry it with them? Because I had a mat and had a sleeping bag and obviously other bits and pieces. And I remember walking back to my mate's car thinking, if I wasn't getting into a car, I'd be walking around holding all this stuff. And how? After one night, and I think all of us felt pretty much the same. We all kind of carried on the next day, but we were all really tired by nighttime, after day jobs and everything else. But I think what's really stuck with me is, how do you carry on? How do you move around with all your stuff in a bag? And you've got to then find somewhere else to bed down for the night. You need to be safe. You need to be secure. You need to be away from people who could potentially harm you. It's just, I think that opened. I've done one sleep out before, but that at 2:30 in the morning, I lost it. At 2:30, I was in tears and I just was broken by 2:30 in the morning. I was just absolutely broken.
And people, and that's the thing. I've been in the world of homeless people for the last 7 years. I've been doing this, and I've really got to know it. But everyone needs to do a sleep out. Everyone.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You need to do one. Just, and it's not that I know people think it's a bit of a flippant thing, or maybe sometimes they maybe do, but just by doing that one, you get to experience, I know in only a tiny bit, but you get to experience what it possibly is like. And then to do that night after night, you know, it's an eye-opener, isn't it?
It's a real opener. And I think actually a lot of people, I mean, the emails kind of we got afterwards were just amazing. People that were like, right, we're going back to our companies and we're changing things. Like, we are going to support and we're going to do this. And they've done it. You know, it's not just been word of mouth or, you know, giving it lip service, as I call it. They've actually gone and done it. They've implemented something within their company. And then a lot of people that did it, you know, last year want to do it again this year, which is amazing. And then I'm going to be launching up in Scotland as well. So Bianca, myself and the whole team at CEO Sleepout, we want to launch Scotland. So I'm going to be going up towards the end of the month to try and do that.
Yeah.
And, you know, the more... It's a hard one, because I think, do you know what, Stuart, before I got into all of this, I would obviously help people on the street, and I would sometimes give money and I would sometimes give food. But now that when you're in it and you're entrenched in it every day, you see a very different side to life, and the materialistic things don't become anything anymore. Like, they're just not important compared to what you see. And like, I was volunteering on Friday night with Charity Begins at Home up on the Strand.
Oh yeah.
And there was like about 250 people. And I was like, how can we still be doing, like, I don't get it. And I know that a lot of, you know, homelessness is entrenched and they don't want to leave the street. They're happy being on the street. But at the same time, I'm just like, this is crazy. Crazy, you know?
It's hard to get your head around. I mean, the week before I was up in at Knightsbridge at a similar thing, and you know the charity, the Restart Lives.
Yeah.
And it's so odd, because whatever way you come in, we either go to Sloane Square and go through that way with all the beautiful houses and stuff that are worth millions, or we get off at Knightsbridge and we come past Harrods, you know, and the sort of, that's the contrast is blows your mind, because you go for all of this wealth and opulence, and then you go into a church and underneath there's like 80 people who haven't got enough money to feed themselves properly. A mixture of homeless people or people on the poverty line. And it just blows your mind, you know, like that. How can these coexist, these two parallel universes? It coexist at the same point, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Well, I think the biggest thing I ever saw was over in, and I love it, and I really think we may be getting back there soon, is the Cappuccino Day Centre in Dublin. You've got to get over there.
Oh, I'd love to. No, I'd love to.
You will have to come, and it's like...
Yeah, I'll come with you.
Brother Kevin, he was one of the first people on my podcast. He's devoted his whole life, he's a Capuchin monk, and he's devoted his whole life. There's pictures of him in the late 60s when he first set up the centre, and he's sort of like a young man with his brown hair, and now he's a little old man, you know, and he puts his cassock on to do interviews and things, and he's just a force of nature, you know, like as you are, like. And he said, and he always tries to feed you as well, because they're so used to feeding people. You don't get out there without a dinner. You know, even if you're not hungry, you have to sort of politely sit down and eat this. And by the way, really nice dinner as well. But they feed like 600 to 700 people a day. Yeah, I thought I'd make you choke on you. It's unbelievable. You walk down the street, and the first time I went, I just felt I'd gone back to, you know, Dickensian times, because there's just rows of people all queuing up. And then later in the morning, we're all cutting hair, and then you see a new queue forming outside, and one of the volunteers says to me, "Look out the window. This is all the young babies getting nappies and stuff. They're all queuing for that, and baby formula and all the, you know." And it you can't believe it. Dublin's a wealthy city. I don't say it's problems, but, and there again, you know, everyone's out having a great time, but there's this other world that you don't know. And I don't want people to feel guilty about that. I want people to go out and have a good time. But what we need to do, it's about, and the CEO Sleepout and everything else you do, which we'll get onto, the buses, is to bring that awareness in. You know, just be aware of it. Don't float around above it without realising what's there.
I think that's the thing, Stuart. I think it's like a lot of people, we're all guilty of it. You know, we're in a rush and, you know, somebody's on the street and they're needing help and you tend to be like, well, I've got to get somewhere, and you don't stop. You know, you don't. I think I always remember the story when I was on a kind of panel, and Polly Neek was there from Shelter. She's the CEO of Shelter. And there was one comment she made, and do you know what? It's stuck in my head now for 2 years. But she was at Oxford Circus, and there was a guy just simply asking for the time. That's all he was doing, was asking for the time. And she stopped and she said, you know, what is it? And can I help? And he was like, I just want to know the time. And he said, you're the 29th person I've stopped, and you're the only that's given me the time. And that still almost makes me cry that we've become a society that can't even stop for somebody, that we can't like give two minutes time to somebody.
Yeah.
That really, I think, when did we stop caring? Like, when did we stop? Well, we stopped when bloody iPhones came in, as far as I'm concerned, because everybody stuck to their iPhone.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those things, you know, I look at the way we are as a world now, we're not connected anymore, you know, but that connection's gone. And, you know, some of the people both you and I speak to, their stories are incredible. You know, they've had life. And I think that's what people tend to forget, is that people that are homeless, you know, they've had a life. They haven't tried to live that way. It's an incident, or, you know, they've lost their jobs, been made redundant, marriage breakdown, you know, had to leave because of stuff going on at home. And I guess I get on my, you know what I'm like, I get on my high horse about it. But I just think, you know, we're too easy in the fact of, you know, we're stuck in our phones. We never look up anymore, you know. And I think I just wish more people would look up and see what's going on around them.
Yeah. I mean, and we're missing out, because there's some wonderful, I say to people, I meet some of the best people at homeless centres and you know, women's refuges and all these, you know, I meet someone. I mean, the first time I went, we're going to talk about the bus. The first time I went to the bus, was you know, I think it was its first day out there, and
it was
that one, and I don't. Funny enough, there was a little bit of a delay getting there, and I had a little wander around, and I bumped into Barrington.
That's right.
Yeah, I'd done Barrington's hair at the Whitechapel Mission before, and I hadn't seen him for 2 years because of the pandemic. He hadn't come in when I was still doing it there, and. But it's this thing that I was walking, just as I went round the corner, he was standing there with someone, and I went, Barrington. And I don't know, where does the name come from? You know, like, I'm giving myself too much credit, because it's a good name, Barrington, because you're going to remember a name. It's not like John.
Remember. But I think people remember, Stuart. People remember your kindness, and people remember that you've spent time with them. You're giving them a haircut, you're chatting to them. Yeah. You know, you're not treating them like second-class citizens. Do you know what I mean? And I think people do remember it.
Yeah. Well, the wonderful thing, he came out, like, and then he came to the bus, didn't he? And he'd been somewhere, and he'd got something. They give him a couple of pairs of new socks. Yeah. He gave me a pair. Barry, he gave me a pair of new socks. He went, look, these are really good ones. These. So I remember, I think it was at Christmas. I can't remember when it was, but he sort of said, "Oh, yeah, you have a pair." And I thought, and funny enough, I come across them in the bottom of my bag the other day, and I got nice Barrington socks, you know. And then I gave him my number and said, like, you know, I'll let you know when I'm coming next. And at Christmas, I got a text saying, "Happy Christmas to you and your family."
Oh, bless him.
I know.
Oh, what a sweetheart.
And I nearly had tears in it. I was like, like, you know, these are the people that we're walking past. These are the people we don't know.
And that's it. You know, that's what I think for me, that's the hardest thing, is like, as we know, I mean, with your book, you know, the amazing book you've done and everything else, it's like, it's people's stories, you know, and I don't know, I think we stopped asking people about themselves. Maybe it was just the way I was brought up. You know, my mum brought me up and she took me off to, you know, riding with the disabled and the elderly, because she did she'd help the aged and stuff, but she was also an aromatherapist. So she used touch as a really important thing, so people elderly with dementia and Alzheimer's, she used to go and massage their hands and stuff like that. But they would, she would take me along. And obviously I used to be like, I don't have to come, Mum. But actually, it was the best thing ever, because it taught me how to be compassionate. It taught me how to actually talk to people, on a level where you're not standing up and looking down on someone, but you're on their level, and I think that's something that I think we've just forgotten. And I'm not generalizing everybody, because not everybody's forgotten how to do it, but I think we forget, especially in London, everyone's rushing. Everyone's like, oh, I've got to be here, I've got to be there. No, actually you don't, you're putting time pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
It would take 2 seconds to stop and have a chat with somebody. That's it. Just a hi, how are you? A smile. That's it. We'll make somebody's day more than you can ever know.
Go back to that then. So where was that? Where was you brought up? Where was Mum?
So I was brought up in Stirling in Scotland. So I was born in London, and then my mum and dad moved up to Scotland because my father got a job in Scotland. He was Scottish, mother's English.
Yeah.
And so we moved back to my dad's hometown, which was Stirling. And unfortunately my father passed away when I was 11. He had a massive heart attack after his 41st birthday.
Oh.
So it wasn't an easy time. But my mum, honestly, you talk about forces of nature. My mother is definitely one of those, in a good way. So she basically almost worked 5 jobs, to keep everything going. And I was at the local comp. And as you can imagine, with a name like mine, Henrietta, that went down a storm. But no, I had a great. I love Stirling, and it's still very much my home. I've got great friends there and stuff. And as I said, aiming to go up there at the end of the month. But then moved to, wasn't academic, hated school, hated it, just wasn't academic. In fact, I left with 2 O grades, as we call them in Scotland, which was home economics and English. So at least I could cook and speak. Even the cooking part's a little bit rough around the edges these days. And I moved to London when I was 19, worked at GTC, General Trading Company in Sloane Street, and at Tiffany's. And then I had to come back with my tail between my legs, because 19 years old and moving to the big city, was totally broke and in debt. So I had to go home and beg my mother to pay off my debts, which I did. And then I came back, nearly 24 years ago now. So I've actually lived down here longer than I've ever lived in Scotland. Right. But my career has been, mainly being a PA. And then my final job, really, before I kind of went freelance, was in 2007. I finished up, I was PA to the managing director of Metro newspaper. And then I ran the PR department there as well, which was great. And then I set up a company called Miss Jones, the PA's PA.
That's good.
Yeah, set that up. Was thrilled. And then left just before my 40th birthday. Won't go into details on here, but decided to leave. There's certain things happened, so I decided to leave. Yeah. Had a bit of I won't lie, I had a rough ride. Myself, I was not financially stable, and also discovered that I had quite a serious mental health problem. And it was basically depression runs in my family. My grandmother was, in those days, she was just diagnosed as manic, or as it is now, bipolar. Yeah. She was on lithium for many years. This is my Scottish grandmother. I used to call it Granny's Turns, when I was growing up. But I knew there was something very wrong, and to the point where I did have, I did want to take my own life. So, and I'm very open about it, because I think you have to be, you have to, it takes a long time to get there to be open about it. But, I've done the work, got there. Yeah. So, I had different forms of meds, and we got them all sorted eventually. And even now I still have to make sure they're balanced and they're all right. But I was diagnosed as a high functioning depressive. Didn't know there was such a title.
That's cool. That makes sense though, doesn't it? High functioning depressive. As soon as you say that, I'd sort of get that immediately. Yeah.
You just keep going. As my GP said to me, he said, your type of depression can be a scary one because people don't see it coming, and then it'll suddenly just hit you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but the main thing is you need to have tools to cope with it. You need to have mechanisms to get through it. And I actually haven't had a bad bout now, probably, I must say, for about 2 years, but I have to be careful. If I get tired or overtired, then I can find myself in that spiral where it's like, okay, black dog circling a bit and I can't get out of bed and I'm tired. So I have to really sometimes push myself to go and do things.
Yeah.
So I guess it's given me an eye-opening to understanding people that have got mental health issues and understanding how they feel and doing all of that. And then I really kind of fell into this world through co-running buses for homeless with Dan Atkins, which was amazing. And we had that in North Acton, but due to COVID, we had to shut down because the lovely public health and everyone else wouldn't let you do communal sleeping, you know, when all the shelters shut.
Yeah.
So we had to shut it, which was really frustrating. But then we had one of our guys, you know, we got them into work and we got them into homes, which was amazing. And we got them, you know, not relying on universal credits. We basically took people in who were referred to us across London, and we would help them settle. And then we would, you know, talk them through the stages of what they wanted to do, you know, where were they from? I mean, we had everyone from electricians to carpenters to painters, to all of that really coming through the doors at B4H. And then we had one guy, Gianni, who was an absolute puppet, had a bit of a trouble with alcohol.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, me too. But we realised there was something very wrong with him before Christmas last year, and I took him up to the hospital and found out he had, unfortunately, metastases on the brain, and then they found a tumour in his lung. So when we shut B4H down, I brought Gianni home with me and got him through. So he stayed with me, and I got him through his radiotherapy. And then we were able to get him back to Italy to be with his family. And then he passed away in May last year.
Oh.
Yeah. So last year was a tough one. Last year on top of, And do you know what, Stuart? I still miss him to this day. You know, they really, doing this work is, you know, you have to take a step back. Sometimes you need to make sure there's a boundary, because otherwise your emotions just get the better of you because you want to help all the time. And you just, there are some people you can't help, you know, you just can't. And Gianni was, I never forget the one, he used to call me Cara, which in Italian means dear. And I said to him, gee, in my house, you don't drink. Like, I can't, because if you're on radiotherapy and you fall down the stairs or something, you know, gets wrong, I'm really worried. And he was like, okay. I said, but I will get you some medicinal form of pain relief. So we all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it. And I told his medical team, you know, I was really open about it. And I said to them, look, he's got 6 months, you know, and I want to make sure that he's relaxed and he's comfortable and he's, you know, he's enjoying his last few months. That's the main thing. And they were like, look, we don't obviously condone it and we don't approve of it, but, you know, whatever you do isn't going to mess with anything that he's doing. So I was like, great, that's fine. But yeah, Gianni's death hit us all quite hard, actually, especially the other guys that had been in a camp with him. But we all still keep in touch, which is great. And then, so when that closed, I kind of went on to do with Change Please, asked me to go and work with them and consult, you know, on the bus project, which I did. Yeah. And we obviously launched Driving for Change, which is amazing, in October. And obviously HSBC sponsored one bus and Colgate sponsored the other. And so you've now seen both buses. I mean, the dental suite is just insane, isn't it, on the Colgate bus?
Really good. Impressive.
Even I was like, oh, hold on a minute. I'll just get my teeth done here. I don't need to. But yeah, I mean, that's phenomenal. And obviously we've got a shower on there, we've got a washing machine, we've got clothes if people need it. And really what we're doing is those are being in fixed locations every day. So we've got, well, we're on 2 days a week at the moment. And then I'm dealing with other councils at the moment to put them into other areas. But it's amazing because the money that Change Please Coffee gets, 100% of the profits go back into Change Please Foundation. So we're able to do this kind of work. And do a third bus, which will be for mental health, because I think although I really hate that term mental health, but
yeah, I'm with you on that.
I hate it. I'm like, everyone's sorry, and probably some people may not agree with me on this podcast, but a lot of people have jumped on that bandwagon of mental health.
Yeah.
I think can be banded a little bit too freely sometimes. Yeah. So it won't be called a mental health bus. But ideally what I want it for is that 17% of men commit suicide on the streets.
Yeah.
You know, and that's in the homeless men. The women's figures, we can't really get that accurately because with females, the last place they'll go is the street. Yeah. They'd much rather sofa surf or stay with mates.
Yeah.
I mean, that we shouldn't even have that figure on the street, Stuart, in men committing suicide. It should not exist, you know. Obviously, somebody is in such a place that they can't see past that thought, and I understand that. But if there's this bus that can help them, where there's a counsellor, there'll be a prescribing nurse, there'll be a proper mental health specialist on there to help them.
Yeah.
And then also for women. So we'll be there, you know, to help women that need smears, that are potential sex workers, you know, whatever. But they can also use that bus as a safety point.
Yeah.
Which is going to be really, because there isn't anything out there, you know, there are amazing people working with the women out there. So I'm talking to all of them at the moment, and then we'll try and get this bus, you know, kind of up and running, hopefully in the third quarter of this year.
Fantastic. I mean, it's so needed. I go to around the country, we've got certain, because we started off obviously focusing on homeless people, but you can't stop there. No. It's always going to blend and move out and ripple out. And it's, you know, ex-offenders, ex-servicemen. We've got women's refugees, but we work with street girls as well, you know, like street workers. And they're quite special, you know, like there's quite a special environment. And I've said before that there's something so, I don't know, I feel so privileged to be able to just be part of that, because they've had such a tough life that their walls that are up, we've all got walls up, but theirs are like reinforced, you know, like, and they come in and they've got this real guarded thing, and you know, an hour session alongside often something else, but you see them gradually, all the walls fall down. And especially with the young, I've got 4 daughters, you know, I've got granddaughters, I just see them as my girls, you know. So when I see a girl of one of my daughter's ages, there's that instant sort of connection. And then when I see that guard come down and then they just turn back into a young girl, all of a sudden, like, you can hear the atmosphere of the room changes. Yeah, and they just become bubbly and they become light-hearted, and they, you know, and you just think,
open.
You know, it's so sad that these girls have to have this life for whatever reason. There was one in particular, and it really hit home. My sister Belinda, obviously, she comes around a lot with me, and this one got her. I know it got her because we was driving back from Peterborough, and she started saying about this young girl. She was a stunning looking young girl, not that matters, I suppose. And she came in and we done her hair, and she looked great when we done her hair. And then she went off and she had a roll and a cuppa. She's just sitting there. And then Belinda's more, we're busy, but Belinda's more of like doing the list and looking around. And she said, I saw that girl when she sat down and she barely finished a drink, and she looked like she was just going to fall asleep on the table. She said, I've never seen a person look so tired, you know, and when you think what they have to do and you know, and she said after a while, she just really looked relaxed and stayed for quite a while. And all of a sudden she got a text message and then it changed. And then you heard a beep outside and she had to go, you know, and you get that where you, I don't know, you can't stop that. You know, you can't, but what you can do is give that respite. Yeah. You can give that little bit of, as you say, that bus will be a safe haven. It'll be a respite. It'd be a couple of hours out. You know what I mean? Away
from the street and away from, God knows what. And I just think, what was it? What's that saying? There by the grace of God go I. Yeah. And I'm not a religious person, but for some reason that always sticks around in my head. Yeah. That, look, we've all of us have been through something in our lives. Like we wouldn't be human if we hadn't. Do you know what I mean? And I know what it's like to literally have no money, from walking away from my business and literally having 200 quid in my pocket, and that was it. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like I was looking, I literally thought I'm just going to have to go and sell my jewellery, or I'm going to have to, and that was scary for me, someone who's always in control. It was like, what do I do? And luckily I have an amazing family, but for people that don't, it's like, what do you do? Where do you go? And that's what worries me. And there's more of it, as we know, Stuart, there are more youngsters coming on the streets now. And that's scary too,
Yeah. I'll tell you another thing I really was impressed with the buses is that you've got that sort of financial help.
Yeah. We need it.
I think that's a great thing. And as well, the brilliant thing is the postal address. Is it to get a bank account as well?
Yes. Yeah. So we do need no fixed address with HSBC. So we get to know the people and then we put them forward for the bank accounts. But the address is our registered address at the charity. So it's our registered address at Change Please, which is brilliant. So it means that people can come and get a bank account. For example, one of our I always call them guests as well on our bus. They're never just somebody that always called guests. So there are guests that come onto the bus. He is rough sleeping, but he's working. But he's rough sleeping and he needs to get a proper bank account set up because they've just frozen. You know how Monzo and Revolut and all that tend to freeze accounts for no reason? Yeah. Or there is a reason, but they can never find out what it is. So basically he's had his account frozen. But you know what? Somebody at his work at a previous job found out that he was a rough sleeper and went and spoke to the bosses about it, and he got sacked for rough sleeping. I was like,
you what? I don't. When I laugh, a lot of the time it's just because it's disbelief. Yeah,
disbelief. He's kept his gym membership going so that he can get somewhere and have a shower. But can you believe somebody went and spoke to the bosses and said that he's rough sleeping, and that company sacked him? I'm like, what?
I know.
It's like, how and why is that possible in this day and age? Why couldn't your HR or you go to that person and say, what do you need? How can we help you? Do you need to use his address? What do you need? And we'll help you get somewhere.
Yeah.
No. It's like, my ideal would be to set up a fund for people like that, to actually have a fund and pay a month's rent in advance and a deposit and make sure they're all right. But obviously they're working and they sign an agreement. But that would be my absolute dream, is to basically, for people that are, because as we know, after COVID, so many people who, lost their jobs, furlough finished, and they couldn't afford where they're staying.
Yeah.
300,000 families. It's ridiculous.
I met, and this was before COVID. I remember meeting a woman in Croydon where we was working, and she had a job. She said, "Oh, well, I work." She said, "But see, homeless means you haven't got a home." Now, if you're sofa surfing, you're not in a tent, but you're homeless. You haven't got a home. And she said, "Why I haven't got a home is because my work is here." And I can't afford to get the money together for a deposit for anywhere around here, and I have to be here for my job. It's that catch-22.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, and a very, ordinary-looking person, like you think she was going off to work straight after. So it's not like the stereotypical thing that people think.
No, and that's interesting. It's interesting about what people think is homeless.
Yeah.
And it's like they think, and I'm not generalizing in any shape or form, but, and it's also explaining to people that just because you see someone drunk or on drugs on the street doesn't mean they ended up on the street because of that. Yeah. That's what coping. I'm like, I said to her, could you imagine sleeping on the street every night? What would you do to help you get through that when you're terrified of where you're sleeping? Or as we know, some of the horror stories, somebody lying in a doorway and somebody peeing all over them. I heard of one where somebody had petrol poured over them and they were so light. I'm like, when did I get absolutely speechless by this sometimes. I really do. And that's, like we said, Stuart, and that's one of the reasons the buses are going to be there, and we'll move the program throughout the UK and we'll do it. But I kind of, if there's like somewhere that's a little beacon where people know it's going to be, and also trust is the biggest thing for this community, as doing the amazing work you do, if you're not there on the day that you say you're going to be there, then they write you off because again, it's another person promising them something and not delivering. So we have to be there. Thing.
Consistency is the most crucial thing we can offer. And this is why we're quite serious about, we take on board about our volunteers that they do it voluntarily, but the only thing we ask for is consistency. So to be a team leader, you've got to be a team leader who can be there every 6 weeks or whenever it is, that you can lead your team. That's why we've got some fantastic team leaders, all across the country. Because we instill that consistency. People have been let down so many times. It takes a while for them to think that you're right. You don't just turn up and then it's a full session. You often get there and it's often 2 or 3 haircuts. It takes a while to get that 20 haircuts going because they think, what are they after?
Absolutely. And another thing is, like I always say to everyone, don't treat, we're going to have to say with our staff on the buses, they're not in a goldfish bowl. And I have to, for example, the other night it was someone trying to take pictures and some guy got really angry and I went, listen, best time to do pictures is when you're setting up on something, but don't do it halfway through when you've got a load of people around because homeless people don't like their pictures being taken like you don't. No. Think about how you would feel. They're no different. And ask somebody's permission before you take a picture,
Precisely.
Because some people don't want to be found. And if pictures are going onto a website, you don't know who's going to see that. And people do disappear for reasons that we don't know. We don't know what's gone on in their life. But, I said, you just have to be really, really careful.
I learned that really early on. Do you know what? I think it was the first or second session I ever did. Because I started in Romford, Salvation Army on my own.
Oh, yeah.
And I just took some pictures to put on Facebook to show what I was doing. That's what I think it was the first time. Second time I went along, guy come up to me and said, Eastern European, I'll never forget. And he really spoke nicely. He said, that's not cool, man. I went, what do you mean? He went, you put my picture on Facebook. And I went, oh, sorry. I thought, like when I took your picture, you didn't mind and that. And he went, well, you didn't ask me, did you? And I went, oh, I'm really sorry, mate. I'll take it off. Like, he went, yeah, it's just that I don't want it.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that because it wasn't done through malice. It was just done through ignorance.
No, you just did,
And now we've got forms, we've got everything. And people, sometimes there's pictures behind me of people, but there are people that don't want to be seen, but there are people that love to be seen.
Oh, yeah.
And they're the only ones that ever get shown. Is the ones that they feel privileged that they're being, no one ever wants to look at me. Now someone does, and I was even shocked that we went to a particular place for the book and Jack Heames, who's an amazing photographer, had done all that. I said to him, look, you can come along, but this was one of the street girls sessions. I said, look, I don't think you'll get anyone who wants there. Do you know, there was only, I think, 1 or 2 that didn't want it cut. Blow dried. Cut, blow dried. Photographed, anyway. Yeah. So there's only 1 or 2 that didn't want their photograph taken,
Wow.
And I was blown away, and some of them are in the book, and they look great, and I was shocked, but that's because they want to be visible.
Yeah.
They feel invisible, they feel unheard. So, it's to give people a voice, to give people a presence.
Yeah, that's it.
But respectfully,
I agree with you more. I mean, I think, Stuart, what you do is absolutely phenomenal, because it does make, I think, again, you know, when you're getting your hair cut, it's that touch. It's somebody, you know, and I think it's something that they feel relaxed, they can talk, and be listened to more than anything. Yeah. You know, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I know what it's like. You go to the hairdresser and I've got a brilliant one and we just chat away and everything else like that. And you forget that, you know, what you do is a transformation, really, from 1 minute, you know, feeling awful, and they're sitting there and you know that sign, you know, their heads are down, they're hunched, and then you show them the mirror of what you've done and it's like, oh my God, you know, I'm a different person, you know, and I think that's such a magical thing to be able to do, to talk to someone and you know, and do that, I think is absolutely amazing. I think your work is incredible. And we're thrilled to be partnering with you, you know, at Drive for Change. I couldn't think of a better way, you know, of doing it. It's, for me, it's fantastic, because you get, your team also understand how to work with people that are homeless too. And that's another thing, that's another beneficial thing, you know, is doing that.
Yeah. That's the, I think, because as well, it's such it's wonderful industry I'm in. I'm lucky to have lived in this industry, because even in a salon, like we stand, so we're in there's that bubble that we have, that we don't let people in, but we're really in that bubble. We're standing above you. We're you know, if you believe all that, we're taking all that energy on, you know, you're
100%.
You're so, and you're laying hands on people. It's such a personal thing, you know. And I remember I had a salon for 30 years. I used to see people with that transformation going out as well. And, you know, like you're someone who's suffered with their mental health. I'm going to find a new word for that. Their mental well-being. You know, we'll have a little brainstorm after this about what we can name it. But you know, and the difference that can make. I've seen that, you know, on a daily basis in that. And you know, as you said, so much of that is such a strong thing at the moment. I mean, I recently, I won't say it is because it's a family thing, but I went to, it's only a couple of weeks ago, I went to a funeral of someone who had taken their own life. And what I couldn't believe is that you think people who take their own life have got to that point where they've got nothing or no one left. But this funeral I went to, this person, there were so many people that had loving testimony, stood and give testimony of what a wonderful person this was. My experience is a very special person, you know, and you think it's going under the radar. 100%. You know, people. There's the obvious people who are struggling with their mental health, but there's people that you're not seeing, and that's why it's so crucial with checking in on people, and because these numbers, they don't have to be as high as they are, you know. It's and it can be done by everyone can, and you know, there's a great charity I know. Tom Chapman's a great guy, and he set up the Lions Barber Collective. And it's where barbers are talking to guys, because this thing of guys not, you know, men especially find it very hard. Yeah, they don't say feelings, they won't say anything. And the guy I'm just talking about was a guy I was just talking about as well, you know. And it's that thing that everyone can just be more aware, you know,
totally,
and just ask and not, you know, not take for granted that everyone's okay.
But that's that wonderful thing, you know. Ronan Kemp did that documentary, which was brilliant. It's like, are you okay? Yeah. And then someone go, well, you know, and be like, are you okay? Yeah. And then it's like, well, no, actually, I'm not. Yeah. And it's like, you know, friends, you know, the kids, the guys that sort of created that was because they'd lost a friend. Yeah. And it's very, you know, I mean, I lost my grandfather. And to that, and you know, it's something that I think it's the problem is, I think when you're that low, I don't remember a lot of that time because your brain switches it off. And, you know, many people say to me, well, how do you know? And I'm like, well, you don't actually, because you're not functioning at your normal level. Because what people don't understand is that, you know, behind all of mental health, there is, behind the illness, and because it is an illness, you have a lack of serotonin, you have a lack of chemicals in your brain. And like, people say to me, well, why didn't you call me? And I'm like, because I can't. I genuinely cannot pick up the phone and speak to anyone. Like, I can't, I can't, you know, and people that don't have it, and I'm not, you know, it's not a criticism, because it's, unless you understand it and know about it and know of somebody that's going through it, it's a very difficult thing to understand when you're well, when you're okay. Yeah. You know, and I joke, because obviously, and I'm again very open about it, going through the menopause. Well, I'm post-menopausal now. Great, at 48. But on top of that, I had to deal with this brain fog, and I had to deal with, you know, feeling utterly shit because I had, excuse my language, no hormones in my body, you know, and trying to do all that. And that got diagnosed during lockdown. So trying to deal with the fact of feeling on my own and lonely, and that the menopause, it was just like, really? Do you really want to put all of this on at this time? So for me, it was great when we came out of lockdown. I was like, oh my God, I can go speak to people again. But, you know, unless you understand it, and I always say to people, if you can, read about it, because it just helps people if you understand a little bit about it. Yeah. And the worst thing you can say to someone is pull yourself together, because I've had that said to me. And I've literally looked at them and gone, you haven't got a clue. You seriously, and also that wonderful joke, I'm not a pair of curtains. Like, literally, let's leave it, because it's very, the problem is, though, I think, is when you are in what we call episodes, when you are in an episode, you don't know what to come out of it. And it's something that when you can't get out of bed and you literally have no will to do anything. And that's one of the reasons I got my dog, was so that I could actually get up in the morning and walk him, get up and take him out. Even today, I was like, oh, I had Burns night last night, an amazing night. And then today I'm like looking at him, and he's like looking at me at 8:30 this morning. And I'm like, oh, come on.